This week on Engage the Sage.
Hi everyone, I'm Don Saucier. Welcome to this week's episode of Engage the Sage. This week, I'm going to talk to you about using content disclosures in your class. The college classroom is an awesome space where we can have our students think critically about the world around them. However, sometimes the content of our course, the information of our course, can be disturbing, it can be sensitive, it can even be traumatic. While I think we should challenge our students to go outside their comfort zones a little bit, we should do so with support. And today we're going to talk about using content disclosures to support our students when we go into these sensitive domains. My graduate students, Noah Rankin, Ashley Schiffer, and I recently published a piece on content disclosures and faculty focus, and we'll link that piece for you in today's description. But I'll give you an overview today of why you might want to consider using content disclosures in your class. First, I think it's important we understand what a content disclosure is. A content disclosure is a notice to your students that you're going to be talking about content that might be sensitive, that might be offensive, that might be traumatic. What you're basically doing is letting them know something potentially distressing or upsetting is going to be discussed in your class and letting them know why you might be discussing it. Sometimes content disclosures are also referred to as trigger warnings or content notices. There's a lot of topics that might kind of fall into this category. We're giving your students some disclosure, some heads up that it's coming might be warranted. These topics might include things like sexual violence, might include things like self-harm or suicide, might include eating disorders, prejudice, hate crimes, racism, or lots of other things that might cause an average person to be distressed when talking about them. But definitely someone who might have some exposure or experience with those things might have a more extreme emotional response. What the content disclosure can do is help your students get ready cognitively and emotionally to engage in that content. It also might let them know whether or not they need to leave the class or not engage in that conversation that day if engaging in that content would be too distressing for them. There are a number of reasons why I think we should use content disclosures in our class. I think content disclosures are going to help our students understand the severity of the content we're going to discuss in our class. I think they help support students' mental health by letting them know what's coming up and helping them getting themselves emotionally ready for that content. I think they help our students acknowledge their own boundaries with the conversations that we're about to have in our class. I think content disclosures help our students make better informed decisions about what courses they even want to take. And probably most importantly, I think that content disclosures make our classes more inclusive spaces where we are intentionally letting our students know that we care about their experiences and their emotions. So next, I'm going to talk about how to provide content disclosures in your class. One of the things I think we should do is we should be intentional and thorough on our syllabi and describing what content is going to be covered in our class, especially if that content has the potential to be distressing for somebody. The link in the description is going to take you to an article that's actually going to provide you some templates for how you can actually craft these syllabus statements to make content disclosures in your class. I do think, though, we should make content disclosures in other ways beyond the syllabus. I think our course descriptions, and especially the way we describe them that first day of the class, should make it clear what is going to be covered so students can make informed decisions about whether or not they can handle that content. You may want to consider making disclosures and announcements over your course management system to let students know when a class that is coming up is going to have some of that potentially distressing content. Similarly, maybe you make an announcement over email, but definitely in class when you're about to discuss that content, I think it's important to let your students know what is coming up. So now that we've discussed content disclosures, what they are, and how to use them, I want to talk a little bit about how to deal with those sensitive topics in your class. I'm going to recommend, as you've heard me say a couple of times, you let your students know it's coming. You foreshadow explicitly that the content is coming up, but also let them know the context for why you're bringing up that content. You're not bringing it up to offend or distress randomly. You're bringing it up because it is important to satisfy the objectives of your course. And if you can't make that connection reasonably and explicitly for your students, you might want to consider not using that content. I think if your class has the potential to be upsetting or distressing or traumatic for your students, providing them with information about self-care and also maybe some campus resources about how to deal with those feelings of distress or trauma is going to be important. It's also a good way to let your students know that you actually care about their well-being. When you're discussing potentially distressing content, I think it's important that we scaffold this. We do so gradually. We don't necessarily hit them with this super shocking image, this super shocking scenario, and hope they're going to be okay. Build to it in a progressive way that lets them gradually get themselves ready cognitively and emotionally. While you're scaffolding through your content, check in on your students and see how they're doing. Pay attention to their verbal and nonverbal cues to see how they're processing that information. And if you need to press pause and take a break, definitely do so. When we use content disclosures, I think it's very important we do not do this in a tokenistic way. We do so in an authentic way so that we're creating a safe space or a safer space for our students to learn in. And if you get into a situation where your students or a couple of your students cannot handle that content, have an alternative reading, an alternative assignment, or something that they can do in place of the thing that is legitimately causing them distress and trauma. It can be enriching for both us and our students to go outside our comfort zones in discussing difficult content. But I think we need to get our students ready to do so. I think content disclosures is a great way to get our students ready to do that difficult work, and I hope you consider using them in your class. In the comments below, I'd love to hear any tips or advice that you have about using content disclosures in your class, and I'd also love to hear any questions that you have about using them. Thank you for watching this episode of Engage the Sage. Please like, subscribe, sign up for notifications, share us on social media, and we'll see you next time on Engage the Sage.